And Brady, I'm here with Dr. Abbie Maroño, who is a behavioral scientist as well as a nonverbal communication expert. Abbie, it's so good to see you. You and I normally speak about CEOs. We're talking about the GOP debate. Let me just start with the question, is it as easy to judge that group on stage? Because I would assume most of them have had a lot of training in what you and I are talking about.
Yeah, that's a really good question. Because when we're looking at nonverbals, it's much easier to detect discomfort than it is comfort, because discomfort is the absence of comfort. And politicians, they have a lot of training, and it's very, very clear. So they're very much in control. And you could see that last night, because in a situation like that, you would expect to see things like lots of self-touch displays. When we're nervous, we touch the face a lot, particularly the lips, and we kind of hold our hands together a lot. You didn't see that at all once. And that's a really, really unconscious, natural display. So if you're in a situation like an interview and I say, don't touch your face, don't put your hands together, it's actually really difficult to do unless you've had a lot of training. And I think just that alone really exemplifies that they've had a lot of coaching.
That said, what stood out to you in terms of who was most effective and perhaps who could use a little more training?
So what's interesting, I love to assess the nonverbals before they think anything has started. So they really think that it begins when they're introduced, but it begins the second they're on stage. So when the national anthem was being sung, you could see their nonverbals, you could see them getting ready. And there were some really interesting behaviors going on there. So we saw Governor Hutchinson kind of stepping backwards and forwards a little bit. So you could see him kind of pacing, and that's a discomfort display. And you could see the same with Senator Scott. But what really stood out, you saw Governor Burgum kick his leg back. He kicked his leg back almost to stretch it. Now, our legs are really strong indicators of our emotions because they're tied to the flight response. If you want to get out of a situation, the first thing you need to mobilize is your legs. So they're really strong indicators. So his legs were saying, I want to be out of here. So you could see the nerves straight away. And then we see the camera move and, everybody does the wave. What stood out was one individual did not wave. He stood out, and that was Senator Scott. You could see that there was a lot of nerves there. So straight away that stood out to me. And that carried on. You could hear a very shaky voice. And we've spoken about this before. When we're nervous, adrenaline is released in the body, and it causes our muscles to tense. And it causes this tenseness in the vocal cords, so they can't vibrate freely. So the voice becomes shaky, and it's hard to control. And you could hear that when he started speaking. But despite that, he still had a lot of power in his voice when he was speaking. He used great intonation, food up 20%, pause. Gas up 20%, pause. Even though he was nervous. But he did show gestures that showed nervousness. So he did kind of like a half point where he went to give an extended gesture and kind of pulled it back. And you could see him become more comfortable as it went on. So the initial start, I would say, he was the most uncomfortable. He showed the most discomfort there.